Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. All right, first and foremost, you got to take your head out of the clouds. You do not belong in the clouds. The only guy who belongs in the clouds is my very special guest, Mr. Paul Higgins, the guru of cloud consultants, and paulhigginsmentoring.com. Paul, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, David.
So you are my spirit animal for niching down into a very specific target market and totally dominating and owning that target market. But I'm guessing it wasn't always like that. So give us the Paul Higgins story. What was the professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today? And what were some interesting stops along the way?
Yes. So I left uni and my father worked for a little company called Coca-Cola. And I was told that I was never going to work there because my father worked there. And they said, look, hang on, look, we're really desperate. Can you just do a job for 6 weeks? And that turned into 18 years. So started as a rep, ended up as a director, always physically within Australia, but did a lot of global roles out of here. And yeah, it was a wonderful journey. The Coke company, even today, when I go and consult for some larger companies, they're still well ahead of the curve. Wonderful journey and sales training. Like there was just every methodology, every form of sales technology. It was just a brilliant company to be around. But in 2011, I had a bit of a health crisis. I've got an inherited condition. It's called polycystic kidney disease. It's basically the kidney failure. And I thought, being a director flying around the world wasn't very active for that condition. So in 2011, I decided to leave and start my own series of businesses.
And what was the first iteration of that entrepreneurial adventure?
To be honest, I didn't know what I really wanted to do, but what was I great at? Other than, being really good at sales, I also realized that I was a great leader. Well, that's what I kept getting feedback from the teams that I led. So I went into coaching corporate people. I did that for about 6 months and realized that I wasn't a great coach because I got so much experience. I want to share it. And through the training that I did, they said, no, that when you coach, the person's got all the answers and you just help them get the answers out. And I'm like, well, actually, they don't, that some of the people that I work with. And the other thing is that, some of the reasons that I did leave corporate was some of the reasons that I just couldn't help them with. And I decided to switch and go to small business. And I basically, with small business, the Coke business provided 2 great things. One was the technology and the other was the people to then go and complement the technology. And that's what I did for small businesses. I set up an outsourcing business to help them get the people. And then I set up a tech consulting business to help them use or tap into the people from working remotely, which back then in 2012, that was still pretty foreign compared to what it is these days.
And at that time, you were working with all different kinds of small businesses, or did you specialize in 1 or 2 certain industries?
It was mainly around thought leadership, so around coaches, consultants, those type of small businesses. So it was less physical goods. It was more leveraging their IP in all different fields.
And then tell us a little bit about the infrastructure there. You had some coaching offers. Did you have a podcast back then? What were you blogging? What was your social media strategy? Kind of give us the sketch back when you were Mr. Generalist, small business coaching, consulting, professional services.
What I used to do is leverage a lot of communities and partnerships. So there was different entrepreneur groups that I'd go and present, and from there I would effectively pick up clients. So that was probably the key thing. It was before LinkedIn was really a thing. Also, it was before, podcasting was around, but it wasn't key. So mainly it was through, face-to-face, and it was building my networks in large communities that already had my client. So that was sort of strategy 1. And then we pivoted onto a particular platform for which worked. And when I started the niche journey was when we decided that agencies was who we wanted to go after. So certain size agency, sort of like 30 employees or less. And that's when we started to really take one particular software platform and help them solve the complexities of running an agency. So that was around 2015, 2016 when that happened.
And was there a podcast or a blog for that as well, or no?
The short answer was no. I first launched my podcast in 2017. So it was close. But once again, it was more through working with partners, i.e., what other software did they use that we could potentially partner with, working with associations that support agencies. So that was how we got most of our leads. And then also working with our software partner that was sending us a lot of leads. And there's a bit of a story as to why that was great. And then it became one of the biggest mistakes that we made, which was relying on our partner for all our leads.
Wow, yes. Great when it's working, scary when it starts to dominate and then things start to change. Tell us about the pivot into cloud consultants, which is where you have now established a beachhead and started to take over the universe. How did that come about? And then talk about sort of the gradual shift in what you were doing to really point all the boats in that direction.
Yeah, so in 2016, my kidney health was very poor, and I decided to take my family around the world for 8 weeks. And part of that, we were supporting a cloud consultancy, and I was a SaaS platform back then. And we basically went to a global meeting. It was an independent company that had just been acquired by one of the largest technology companies in the world. And having all my experience from Coca-Cola, I sort of knew what a franchisor or franchisee was meant to do. And out of this meeting, I called my business partner at 4 a.m, his time here in Melbourne. I was in Copenhagen in Denmark. And I said, we're getting out of this. He said, what do you mean? We've got 30 people that support this platform in the Philippines. This is what we do. I said, this is not what we do. These guys are going to turn a small company into a very small company. And, that's the benefit of having a few radios under your belt where you've seen it before. I could see the signs very quickly, and we left that platform. And then from 2016 to 19, we actually chose a couple of others. And one was giving us, 80 leads a month, which was fantastic. They changed strategy, and then all of a sudden we were left with no leads. I was sitting on a dialysis machine and we had a large payroll. So that was, quite confronting. And that's when we found LinkedIn. And LinkedIn became our absolute savior, where we used LinkedIn to generate our leads. And we ran that business up until 2019. The sales system that we built was hugely successful. That led to a good multiple. And my business partner went with the sale. And in 2019, post-transplant, so I was feeling great. The world was really bright because I just sold my business. I then decided, well, who am I going to go after? And that's where the cloud consultants journey really started.
What made you choose cloud consultants in particular?
Look, I'd worked a little bit with coaches and consultants in the past, as I said, and I thought that I could help coaches and consultants love technology, right? But what I realized is, no, they loved people and they were very put off by the technology piece. And I thought, well, why don't I do a combination of both? People that consult, they also love the technology. And I also realized that that's what I loved, right? Having my Coke experience, where, like I said, whereas Coke was, a franchisor, franchisee, it was the exact same system with some of the SaaS partners, where they did the product, they did the marketing, but then the partner went and implemented and did everything else. So it felt like being back at home. I was just in what I felt was a better reason for being for a product, which technology, I think, can help a lot more people than what sugar in a can from Coca-Cola. And yeah, it just seemed a natural fit. So I thought, well, this is crazy. Like, it was staring me in the face and I just didn't realize it. And that's when I embarked on the journey of the Cloud Consultants Collective.
You said something really powerful a moment ago, which I just want our listeners to really think about, that serving a certain market will take your small company and make it smaller. And if you realize that, wait a minute, I'm selling to broke people, I'm selling to folks who don't get it, they don't want it, they don't need it, it's too much chasing, it's too much persuading, it's too much convincing. How can I sell to people who get it, want it, need it, and are going to be a dream to work with? And that's going to take your small company and make it bigger. It's not going to take your small company and make it smaller. Do you love selling? I know, me too. Do you hate selling? I know, me too. Listen, fantastic sales book you got to get your hands on. How do I know? It's mine. That's how. Do It Selling is now available for sale. Grab your copy, grab all the bonuses, all the companion tools, all the training, all the videos that go with it at doitselling.com. See you over there. So tell us a little bit, Paul, how does the company make money today? I know you've got a couple of different levels to your program. You've got the scale program, you've got the fast track program, you have this amazing free community. Talk about how did you put those pieces in place? What came first? What came second? What came third? And then what are each of these pieces?
Yeah, well, I'm sure we've all had a situation where we've thought we've got a fantastic idea, we build a product and then go out and try to find a market. And, sometimes that works, but often it doesn't. So this time around, I actually really took some time to build the audience first. So when I built two key assets, one was the podcast, which at that time was the Accelerate Sales Show. Now it's the Cloud Consultants Show. So I built that to basically add as much value to this audience as possible, because this audience, they get a lot of technical value from the partners. So whether it's Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, ClickUp, you name them. But they don't get a lot of business advice. How do you better run your business? So that's when I got someone like you, David, who's been on the podcast and did a brilliant job. I get experts around the world to help them better run their business. So that was one thing, was the podcast. And then the other was the free community. So I started the Cloud Consultants Collective, where peers could ask questions of peers. I think it's so valuable. Once again, most of the platforms are specific. So they'll only focus on, say, Salesforce, or they'll only focus on HubSpot. But ultimately, the business model is very similar and we can all learn from each other. So those were the two key things that I built the audience understand exactly what their problems were. I thought I knew them because I was one, but actually taking your own point of view can sometimes be dangerous. So I really wanted to get their point of view, work out what they wanted, and then I had the services off the back of that.
Now, this would probably scare some people listening, and it shouldn't, but it might. So it's like, okay, wait a minute. Paul has this free community that is aimed at the exact same prospects, the exact same firms that he makes really good money from. And it's like, what if they start getting too many good ideas from the community? What if they start coaching and mentoring each other instead of coaching and mentoring with Paul? How did you assess that risk, so to speak? Did you see it as a risk? And what were some of the factors that swung you into, yes, this is something that I should do, could do, will do, and it's not a threat, it's a huge asset?
Yeah, look, I've always been one that believes in you give as much value as you can, and not everyone is going to go and implement that, right? So let's say 10% of people will actually take all the information and implement it perfectly, right? But the 90% won't. So I was always of the opinion that, people will look at it and go, yes, I really need this, but I'm not going to implement it. And the other thing is that peers helping peers, like, they're very, very busy as it is, right? So they're not going to have time to go and change their business model or all of a sudden go and help other people. So I thought that was a very low risk as well. And it's played out that way. Like, it's been a brilliant ascension program, I suppose, where, yes, it's free. Yes, I provide lots of value, but I've also got lots of clients that I've helped because of the fact that they've got value and they've realized that they can't do it themselves.
Give us a little bit of the dynamics around the group. So, for example, is it a Facebook group? Is it a Slack channel? What are the mechanics of it? And then how do you set it up where I'm guessing that you're not providing all the answers, but you're facilitating them helping each other and you're facilitating sharing and conversation. So walk us through kind of the mechanics and then walk us through the dynamics.
So we wanted it to be as easy as possible, both for the people that are in it, because like I said, they're incredibly busy, and also because of the fact that we didn't know whether it was going to work. So we just set it up on Slack, a free Slack group. thought that was the easiest. I've run communities before on Slack. It was pretty easy. And also we wanted to keep the channels as minimal as possible, right? Because some of these people have got, 10, 15 Slack groups that they're in or Slack channels that they're in, and we didn't want to make it complicated. So that's what we did. We set it up on Slack. We had a couple of channels like IE questions, like, if you got a question, post it, get an answer. We always introduce people, and every person I actually met face to face that came into the community, and I still do it today. So I really get to know them and work out how I can either connect the dots. So, for example, one HubSpot partner in America needed someone in the UK from Salesforce as an example, where now I can actually connect those dots. Or someone always asks someone, what help do you need? What experts do you need? And then I've got a collection of experts that I've got that are just specific to this industry. And then I can collect those. So, my services are more for the overall strategy, where I actually look at the business model. I look at how they're creating their sales and marketing engine, and then also how they're developing their teams. But when there's a specific area of expertise needed, that's when I bring in a partner to deliver that for them. Often that when someone posts a question and, yes, we can give them some content, but often that'll lead to actually, I need a resource to help me implement that. And that's when we connect the dots.
Right. Tell me a little bit about selling, not selling, or selling without selling in the free group. How do you handle that? How do you manage the temptation to go, oh, this is something I could really help with, but you know what? I'm the facilitator. I'm neutral. I'm just a friendly convener of this community. So tell us about selling, not selling, and selling without selling in the group.
Yeah. So, on the onboarding calls, if I see an opportunity where I can really help someone and it's clear that they need help and they ask, I will then go and have a call with them to talk about it. And I'll do it separate to the call. I always have the set questions that I ask people. So that's one opportunity. The other is I've got a newsletter. It's called the Accelerator. It goes out every week. And in that newsletter, I always have the podcast. So that's adding value. I also have a specific resource that they can use. So something that they wouldn't have heard of before. So I provide that. And then I'll also talk about a service, right? So I always talk about one service that I provide and then a little bit from me. So that gets about a 40% open rate each week. So that newsletter is a way that I'm also selling without selling, if that makes sense.
I just want to, again, emphasize and underline every person that joins, and I'm guessing there's an application process, you will hop on a 30-minute one-on-one personal Zoom with each applicant.
Yes,
wow.
Yeah. And the key thing to that is obviously to get to know them so I can help them, but also we do a video where I ask them, 4 set questions. That video then goes into the group so that people get to know them as well and they feel a lot more comfortable. So, that's a dual purpose there.
Nice. And then you post that video in the group.
Yeah.
By way of their introduction.
Correct.
Fantastic. So tell us about the paid offers. Tell us about how Fast Track works, what that is, how it works. Tell us about Scale, what that is, how that works.
Yeah. So Fast Track is a 6-week done with you LinkedIn program, right? So we still think that LinkedIn outreach is something that from B2B sales works exceptionally well. Like I said, I started it in 2017 and it's worked wonders. I was actually coached by the guy that at that time was doing Tony Robbins, Jay Abraham, sort of like all the big guys. He'd heard about my story that I was on dialysis and that I'd lost some leads, and he was, very kind in helping me. So we've sort of taken that and perfected it over time. And what I find is a lot of people do courses, a lot of people pay experts a lot of money to do it completely for them. We think that no, you could actually develop one of your own team members to act as you on LinkedIn and do a lot of it. So within the 6 weeks, we basically give you a playbook that at the end of the 6 weeks, you can go with your team and implement to get consistent leads on LinkedIn.
Great. And then people love that. They say, Paul, I want more. I want to go deeper. I want to go further. I want to stay more connected to you. Is that where the Scale program comes in?
Yeah. And then I think Ascension's good, but it doesn't always work that way. So it depends on the specific problem that someone has. But look, often, Scale is, okay, we hit a certain growth curve. So for most of these people, it might be, I've got 10 people, but I'm still doing all the work. I know what I want to achieve. I want to achieve a lifestyle where I want someone running the business. I still do the strategy, but I want to get out of sales, I want to get out of delivery, etc. And I'm not quite sure how to do that by myself. And that's where I come in and work with them initially for 3 months as a minimum, where we work one-on-one weekly. Plus there's a lot of videos and a lot of information that I give that is very specific to their situation. And then what we often do is work then on a share of revenue model, where once we decide that we both can see the upside, then we actually work on a share of revenue where I keep 90% of the value and then I get 10% of the value.
So initially there's a fee paid service and then it switches to revenue share.
Yeah. And then let's say it's 80-20, 80% will move to revenue share. Some people don't want to do that. They still want to work on a retainer, and then I'm happy to continue it that way.
And that's one-on-one. There's no group component to that.
Not at this stage. Look, it'll definitely evolve to group, but I actually treat it, because I was a cloud consultant, I treat it as if it's my business. I sort of take on 5 to 6 people at once, and I'd rather have a really huge impact than sort of do it to the masses and not really move the needle. So that's the decision I made at the moment. It may not always stay that way, and I've done group and I've done masterminds in the past, but at the moment, yes, it's one-on-one.
Great. Let me ask you this. As far as this niche, because everything you described, generating leads on LinkedIn, scaling the business, getting out of delivery, every kind of professional services firm probably wants this. So not just cloud consultants, but engineering firms and management consultants and cybersecurity consultants and, all kinds of other, architectural consultants. But you have decided to set up camp. These are your people. You are one of them. Have you been tempted, or how do you overcome the temptation, if you've been tempted, to say, oh, I've got this perfected. I've got this dialed in. I know how to build, grow, scale, maybe even exit. I'm going to go broad. And you haven't done that. Is that tempting? And how do you talk yourself out of it when that thought might occur to you at 2:00 in the morning?
Yeah, look, and it definitely does, right? I'm one of the benefits of the Coke company is you always grew, right? They're always looking at, how do I grow 10x? How do I
line extension, brand extension, new markets, right?
Right. And in my DNA, it's the same. So yes, look, I constantly battle with that. But I think one thing is I always start with the end in mind. And, if you haven't read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I recommend you do. But it talks about what do you really want? Now, for me at the moment, I'm 4 years in from a transplant. I've got 2 children that are about to travel overseas. At this point, I want to manage my health first, my family second, and then my business is third. So I make sure that it's in proportion. And to be honest, I don't want to run a large business. So that's, probably the overall arching strategy there. And I'm very disciplined around that because, my health is absolutely critical. My best mate gave me this opportunity to have a new life with a new kidney. And, I don't want to mess that up. So that's one. And then the other one is there's 59,000 known cloud consultants in the world across multiple platforms. At the moment, I'm actually just focusing on a few key ones. So there's a lot of runway. And to me, I've got more work than I could ever do within this particular niche. And the third thing is that I cannot tell you how many times people get on and say, you know what, I had a coach or a consultant, but it took me so long for them to understand what I actually do that we never got to really move the needle. Whereas what I love about you is you've got all the experience of being one. So it's just like I'm talking to myself in effect. You understand my world so well. You understand me so well. And, that's what I love. And I think every time a potential client tells me that, it just validates the value of picking a niche and doubling down on it. And one that is sizable. Right. And,
yes.
I de-risk myself because I am multi-platform, and I de-risk myself because I'm multi-client. So, there's still a lot of upside.
Right. It's so funny. I was going to ask you, Paul, do you know exactly how large your prospect universe is? And of course you do. It's 59,000. So that's fantastic. Is there a size? Like, is there a minimum size, either by revenue or number of employees? Is there a maximum size, either by revenue or number of employees, that you typically like to work with?
Yes. So really for me, sort of the 1 to 20 size businesses where the owner is still the person that's pulling all the strings. Now, some of those businesses are, from $500,000 to, maybe $4 or $5 million in turnover. But that's who I really love to work with. Eventually, I'll have a program where someone, say, leaves corporate or leaves, say, Salesforce themselves and want to set up their own business. But that's not where I'm focusing at the moment. And at the larger end, so the 20-person plus, I got, some people that have got 250 people in their business through a sophisticated Salesforce partner. I can still provide them value, right? But it's not working directly with me. That's where I normally point them in the right direction to either another partner or someone else. And, I might collect an affiliate fee, which is disclosed, et cetera, where I can still earn some money off them. So one quick example is, a lot of them are struggling to get talent, like probably you are. It's difficult. It always will be difficult. And, I've partnered up with a staffing company that get government subsidies to place junior talent to support high-level talent in a team. If someone needs that and I introduce them to that, the actual company then pays me an affiliate fee for that, which once again is disclosed, but, that saves them marketing costs and it saves the client making bad hires. So it works really well.
Yes, I love that. And just having the satisfaction of knowing that you've connected a great client with a great resource. And then, as you say, you disclose the financial relationship, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you want that client to get a great result.
Yes.
I'm curious, because again, I love the specificity of all your answers. 1 to 20, 500K to 5 million. Is that just who showed up, or were you targeting that? Or so, for example, why not, 5 people to 50 people, 1 million to 10 million? What was the criteria that you used to zero in on that demographic that you just shared?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One is that's, typically the industry size, and running a services business is difficult. And sometimes that, it's hard to scale it larger than that. And, so one, that's the typical size. The other one is that's what we ran, right? So I feel very comfortable helping people who we ran and we sold that business, right? So I'm very confident that I know that getting to that stage, I, never built a 250-person business. I've run 250-person teams within corporate, but that's very different. So I find that, it's better for someone that has done that to mentor people at that level versus for me, I feel much comfortable or more comfortable where I've been.
And I'm also curious, the solo practitioner, this is about perhaps the group dynamic in the free group and so forth. I think if you're running even a small firm, 4 or 5 people, and you see a couple solopreneurs out there in the fishbowl, is there a dramatic difference between what that solo practitioner or lifestyle business consultant wants and needs versus what the 4-person firm needs, or it's not as different as we might think?
It's not as different as we might think. The real key to this is generating your own leads. So a lot of businesses rely on their partner, let's say Salesforce, to send them leads, right? And you can build, a 10, 20-person business just relying upon that. But at the moment, Salesforce have laid off a lot of people. The leads has led to a bit of change. And as I said, I was burnt by when we used to get 80 leads a month from a partner and they disappeared overnight. So my view is the real difference is you creating a way of generating your own leads. So building your own sales system that's not relying upon the brand owner. I think that's the key difference to really scale sustainably.
Absolutely. Tell us about your adventures in podcasting. Because again, as we said, I had the pleasure of being on your show. The podcast, obviously, it's free value, it's visibility, it's credibility. Were you also using the podcast as either sort of a prospecting tool? Was the podcast a platform to share client success stories? Like you have clients on the podcast to share a little bit about what they're up to. Give us kind of the podcast monetization strategy. Yeah,
great. Well, foremost, it is just, I suppose, getting people that have been very successful and sharing with their peers the way that they've done that. So that's the core of the podcast. Also solo every second week. And that is where I will give specific value from a client engagement that I've had, right? So I don't call the client out, but I give the examples of this is exactly what's happened. So it's very practical and it's real life, which for a lot of people that listen to that then follow up with me to say, hey, look, I need that. So that happens that way. Around 20% of my guests ends up become clients in some shape or form. And, that's in various formats. And then the other one is just at the end, I always ask, do you know someone that would be a great guest for the show? And often those great guests for the show then potentially become clients. And the last thing is I do have sponsors as well that provide value specifically to this audience. So there's a small monetization on the sponsors as well.
Hey, if you're loving this episode as much as I am, pop over to doitmarketing.com/manifesto and get your free 37-page download guide to how to sell smarter, sell more easily, sell more often. That's what we're here to help you with at The Selling Show. Off you go. I want to go back to the Fast Track program and your approach and your philosophy and your advice on LinkedIn. So many people do this wrong. And I'm sure you get these pitches all the time. I get these pitches all the time. And I think cloud consultants and really any kind of consultant says, oh, no, hold on. I don't want to be one of those connect and spam people. It's like, hey, Paul, I really love the work you're doing over there at Paul Higgins Mentoring. I have a webinar. I have a program. Do you want some help growing your business? It's like, whoa, dude, I don't even know you yet. So give us a little bit about how you teach people not to be one of those connect and spammers.
Yeah, look, I think, the number one thing I'd recommend is that treat people how you like to be treated, right? So often I'll have a bit of a game when someone will send me something spammy like that. I'll go back and say, what would you do if you received something like this? And, it's funny, they often joke back, but, LinkedIn is no different to meeting someone at a networking event in person, right? It's the exact same thing. So you just got to treat people that way. And your number one asset is your profile, right? If someone gets a connection request from you or you send them a message, what are they going to do? They're going to go and look at your profile. And if you've got a great profile, right, that'll do the heavy lifting for you. You don't need to do the heavy lifting in the text, right? And remembering that 3% of people are ready to buy from you at any time, right? So what you don't want to do is go and destroy it for the 97% of people, right, that are still being nurtured. So, for me, we split test and it's about a 50-50 where if you send a connection request with no message versus sending one with, it's about even, right? So we actually, we do both of those. And, typically what I do is say, look, this is why I've reached out to you. This is what I do. This is the way I add some value. If there's any way that I can ever help you, let me know, right? And that's it. So I leave it at that. And then a lot of people will then re-engage. And when they re-engage, then we'll follow it through. And it's always open-ended questions. It's short questions of just getting them to reply. It's, I use the classic analogy. Well, it's changing these days, but when you buy a car, right? The first thing is when someone walks in, they just want to understand, why they're trying to buy a car. There's nothing worse when someone pitches you a car that, they don't even ask you why you want to buy. They don't even ask you who's the car for. Predominantly it's males. They go straight for the male. The female's actually the person that wants the car. And then the other thing is, all they want you to do is do a test drive first. It's the exact same way on LinkedIn. And the other thing is that if you have got a workshop, etc., you can send those later. So I always have a PS at the bottom saying, look, you will get some invitations to some content from me in the future, but I'm just here helping people like you, right? So there's that opportunity as well. But, people are smart enough. They can connect the dots. If you've got a great profile and they really want to get something off you, they will. You don't need to hard pitch them because hard pitching them, as you said, will put people off.
And I love this, the way that I sometimes describe this, it's the sale of the moment. So initially when we connect, with a message, without a message, we might as well not send the message because, again, nothing to hide, nothing to prove. We're not going to get fancy. Connection request. Oh, let's look at Paul's profile. Oh, I'm a cloud consultant. Well, this is my guy and maybe I'm his guy. So accept, great. Initial message is, do you thank them for connecting, or is that even fishy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I thank them for connecting. So once they connect, I thank them and that's it. I just thank them. And then, 5 to 7 days later, I'll then send the message, which is I'll compliment them on something which is specific to their profile. Then I'll say, this is, what I do, who I do it for. This is how I add some free value. If you ever want some help, I'm here for you. And words to that effect. And that's all I do. I just leave it there. And then
those people are just respond. Now in your universe. They're in your ecosystem. Yep. Do you invite the people that you've specifically targeted for connections? Do you invite them to the collective, to the free group?
At the moment, we're not, because we're using the profile and we're using referrals to build it. So the biggest mistake that I made was initially getting so excited about this free community that I thought everyone wanted it. And what I did was actually burnt some of my relationships with larger partners. So if you've got 30, 40 people, you may not want to be in the collective because, you're already so busy that you don't need another Slack group, right? So I'd help them in another way. So I burnt the bridge by just going straight to, hey, would you like to be part of the Cloud Consultants Collective? Now, once again, my banner on the LinkedIn profile clearly states the Cloud Consultants Collective. It's one of the companies that it's got its own company spot on my profile. So if people want to join, they will. I don't pitch it anymore. Learned the hard way.
And it's funny because I'm sure you never pitched it before. You invited people, but it somehow felt like a pitch to them.
Yes.
When it felt like a pitch to them, it started to feel like a pitch to you.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm not doing myself any favors by doing this. Let me stop. And it's funny because it is in your banner image. It also is in your about section. So now people are thinking, how do I get invited? He didn't offer it to me. He didn't pitch it to me. So right away, it's got more value, right? Because something that's it's not easily attainable. It's like, do I have to qualify? Are there certain criteria? Do I have to have a certain hairstyle? Because Paul and I have the same hairstyle, roughly. Is it the Handsome Bald Man Club? We don't know. But it's so great having it featured. And then you're like, I'm not inviting you. It's like, not inviting them is more attractive than inviting them.
Yeah. And like I said, we all get pitches. So once, or requests that we don't enjoy. So, just don't be like that. Treat them how you'd like to be treated yourself. And it's pretty easy from there. But I think the downside is when people don't do anything. I think, don't be put off by the poor messages you get to stop you doing it the right way with others.
For sure. I also love, and people will put this in among the other fantastic links that Paul's going to share here in a couple of minutes. I would love to put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as number one, a beautiful example of doing it right. And then number two, for cloud consultants that are listening, you should also connect with Paul on LinkedIn. But you start with personal. You do not start with professional. And I think this also speaks to what you said about, treat this like a networking event, right? So be a human, be a three-dimensional human being. So you put your passions, you put your transplant recipient status, transplant recipient, golfer, and family guy, live in Australia, little koala bear, and work virtually around the globe. So that's cute. That's charming that we're using little emojis in there. And then you immediately talk after that, not about yourself, not about how amazing and fantastic and your whole resume, but you say, well, here's the kind of people I help, and here's the kind of problems I help them with. And a couple of links if they want to check it out. And that's it. Was it a conscious decision to put the personal stuff first? And tell us about that bravery step of being personal first.
Yeah, look, and it's the same. Whenever I meet someone, I want to know the person first, because I'm working with business owners that their business is normally not the most important thing to them in the world, right? Their whole life, their family, that's the most important thing. And the business helps fund that. Yeah. So, that's what I think. And, people still buy from people. And, often with the marketing automation and other things, we sort of lost sight of that. And also, I think, post coming out of COVID as well, like a lot of people had to do some soul searching to work out who they really are and what they want to be. And I think if you know me, and by doing that statement, and the other key thing that I have in my profile that I highly recommend undo is a 2-minute story of you, right? You can have it in the featured section. So I've got mine because, buying services, if you're in the service-based business, and ultimately people are buying me, right? And, some people will like me, some people won't, but ultimately I am who I am. And the easier I make for people to understand me and work out if I'm going to be right for them, the quicker and easier it is for them. So that's, I strongly recommend that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, as we're landing the plane, I also want to talk to you about the word mentoring. You mentioned about coach and coaching, that was not the model that you wanted, right? Because typically capital C coaching is what I call it. Capital C coaching, the client has the answer. It's your job to pull it out of them. And so you did not want to go under the label coach. Consulting, I think, has maybe a different feel to it. You landed on mentoring. PaulHigginsMentoring.com is the main website. Tell us about that word mentoring, and tell us about how your prospects and clients relate to that word mentoring.
Look, for me, it was, the fact that I scaled and sold a cloud consulting business. I thought that gave me the right to say, look, I'm going to mentor you in the same journey, right? Because I've been there and I've gone through it. So that's why I used mentoring. At times, some people say, mentoring I thought's free, but you've got paid services. So sometimes people get a little bit confused by that, but it's probably the 5%, not the 95%. And
sure.
To be honest, I wanted PaulHiggins.com, and out of the world, the guy that owns that lived 2 kilometers or 1 mile from my house and wanted it for his personal email. And he doesn't run a business. He's in his 80s. So I'm still hopeful, and I'm not hopeful that he passes, but when he does, that his family thinks, well, maybe they can give it to me. And ideally, I'd like to have just PaulHiggins.com. It's a lot easier to type, a lot shorter. But for now, it's PaulHigginsMentoring.com.
There you go. There you go. Well, as the recipient of a kidney transplant, at some future point, perhaps we'll get a domain transplant.
Correct.
Well, Paul Higgins, this has been such a pleasure. So fantastic. Value bomb after value bomb. Thank you. Thank you. How do people get connected and stay connected to you and your world and all the great things that you're doing? What are some links? What are some resources we can share?
Yeah, so PaulHigginsMentoring.com is where it's all at. It's got the Cloud Consultants Show. It's got the Cloud Consultants Collective. It's got all my services. So that's where it's all at. You can also go to my LinkedIn profile, as David said, to have a look at that. Maybe there's something there that you can use for your profile. And that's once again, Paul Higgins Mentoring. So LinkedIn, Paul Higgins Mentoring. There's not many of us on LinkedIn, so hopefully you find me quickly. And also I've got an ebook which I've created, which really goes through 3 key things that I spoke of before: the business model, sales marketing engine, and the team. And even if you're not a cloud consulting business, but you're a professional service business, you can go and look at that ebook, and it really gives you a bit of a guide as to what I believe makes successful businesses versus not. And you can, benchmark that against your own. And that is paulhigginsmentoring.com/blueprint.
Fantastic. And if you are a cloud consultant, and if you know a cloud consultant, and if you are friends with a cloud consultant, or perhaps even a group of cloud consultants by way of an association, a local chapter, etc., please do them a huge favor and point them over to Paul Higgins Mentoring, and all of the links that'll be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Paul is genuinely the definition of the go-to guy, the go-to resource to help cloud consultants succeed. Paul, such a pleasure. We could talk for hours. We're going to land this plane for right now, but we totally have to have you back.
Yeah, Brent, I'd love to do that, David, and thanks for the opportunity.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.